Denmark Jameson here, and you're watching CNN. The top story tonight involves comedian Dave Chappelle, the host of Chappelle's Show, a recent sketch in which Chappelle appears as Black Bush, President Bush, but with a black persona, is causing a lot of controversy across the news, the internet, and the public. In this sketch, President Bush, or Black Bush, talks about the invasion of Iraq. Now, in this sketch, it brings in race, humor, and satire to critique the invasion of Iraq. But question, is it really a critique of the invasion of Iraq, or does humor and other factors drown it out? Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I'm going to have two guests here tonight to discuss whether or not it is a proper form of critique or just simply a humorous sketch. So first up, I have Dr. Zebediah Horowitz from Zanderfield University. Thank you, Denmark, for having me on your show. I am taking the stance that this sketch known as Black Bush is not a critique of the invasion of Iraq, or at least not a successful, proper critique of the invasion. If you watch the sketch, Chappelle is constantly using the N-word. He's constantly using various vulgarities. He addresses women in a derogatory fashion. He makes jokes regarding gay people. He is not particularly focusing on addressing the invasion, but more or less this is just an opportunity to use humor on his sketch comedy show. I also think it's important to note that he is reinforcing stereotypes in this video. I don't think anyone could argue that the sketch is directly related to the invasion of Iraq, but in this it's more concerned with the black aspect of Black Bush rather than the Bush aspect, meaning that he is more or less talking about race rather than war relations. And with this, the race that he's talking about could easily be interpreted as condoning stereotyping. I have my PhD in African American Studies, and I do not think that he is properly addressing the issue. Now, many people could interpret it as not reinforcing these stereotypes, but if you look at various audiences, there are plenty that think they have seen this before. This is nothing new to them. This is reinforcing what they already see on the media. So with that, I think that he uses too much humor to critique anything. Well, like I said earlier, this is a sketch comedy show where his role is to make people laugh. Of course, satire can do that, but I think Chappelle goes over the board with this, and he's more concerned with the humorous approach to this rather than making a statement. And of course, he is poking fun at the war, but I think that is a distraction in itself of possible activism that could be going on. So with that, I think that he is wanting people to laugh at Bush and politicians rather than make a change. Chappelle is accepting the flaws within this system. And I'm sure I will be answering questions later on, but that's just what I have now. Thank you, Dr. Horowitz, for that unique take on the situation. Next up, we have Jensen Salmon, who is a stand-up comedian and currently a student at Yale University, who is going to argue that this sketch is in fact a valid critique and should be paid close attention to. Is this thing on? Am I good? Hey, what's up, brother? I want to thank you for having me on your show. Just got out of the sauna from playing cricket on campus. So, what I want to talk about is how this sketch is a proper form of critique. And I believe this is attributed to a variety of factors. First of all, Bush's rhetoric leading up to the invasion of Iraq was based around lack of evidence, basically. This isn't even getting into the fact that he's trying to sell a war. I'm not even talking about oil yet. What I'm trying to say is that Bush's rhetoric, he was really trying to say that there could be something here, and therefore we should invade to look at this, even though the UN did not want to have anything to do with this. So I think that Chappelle is valid in the sense that he has the right to critique Bush because we were all probably thinking these same things. And so he critiques Bush's lack of proper discourse, but in a humorous way. Next, I also think that because we live in a day and age where there's 24/7 news cycles that basically rely on entertainment to get points across, then the system is flawed. And this form of satire is kind of poking fun of that established way of getting the news out there. So if you look at The Daily Show and The Onion and The Colbert Report and whatnot, I think that they are all basically cashing in on this, that journalism is so bad that you can poke fun about it and still persuade people to form an opinion on a matter. So with this Black Bush sketch, I think that Chappelle brings up certain issues that the media sort of talked about, but they did it in such a bad way and so profit-driven and linked to the government that this isn't a chance for audiences to step back and look at this through a different lens. I also think that with this sketch, he uses race accordingly. He is a black man. He has the ability to poke fun about these things, and I don't think he's reinforcing stereotypes. I think he's just encouraging others to look at it differently. And with that said, I really think that this sketch has the ability to persuade people to consider satire as a new way to take in political issues, because if the system is failing, then this is a new way to look at it. Sure, he uses humor. I think it's hilarious, but it's an opportunity for audiences to analyze the invasion of Iraq, which is a big deal, in a different manner. And I think that that is what is important in the end. Excellent take, Jensen. So we're running out of time, but I have one last question for the two guests here tonight. What is one example in the sketch where you feel your point is proven? Well, yes, excellent question. I think a perfect example is in the middle of the sketch when he's talking about a coalition of the willing, and he basically brings up Japan sending PlayStations, and Stankonia is willing to drop bombs over Baghdad, which is, of course, an Outcast reference. I know these types of things. So I think that with that, he brings in a lot of pop culture and a lot of things that are cheap jokes instead of exactly addressing the issue at hand. And I think that's basically what the entire sketch is. Oh, God. I had actually fallen asleep. Sorry. So, I think that a perfect example actually occurs near the very end when talking about the United States of space going to Mars. When Black Bush says that everyone's focusing on the war in Iraq, and he says, "I've got this under control. There are other things you could be focusing on." I think that's a perfect example of what Bush is doing, meaning that he is basically taking in his personal account, not listening to public opinion or international opinion for that matter, and going with it and trying to deflect the issue by bringing in other things. And to me, that is a great critique of the issue at hand. And it's funny, but it's a perfect example of what Bush is doing. Both bring up excellent points. I think that this was an excellent broadcast where we were able to get two different sides on a very hot topic going on right now. And just from what I've gathered, I think that it's important to consider interpretation in all this. We all come from different racial, political, economic backgrounds. Sometimes we interpret humor differently, and I think that that plays a crucial role on whether or not this is a proper critique or not, because some of us have witnessed satire more than others, and then some of us, we just focus on what's funny because we are watching a show that, tries to be funny. So I really think that the whole debate is up completely for interpretation of the person who's asking. This concludes the broadcast. I want to thank you for joining me. Signing off, I am Denmark Jenkins. I think that's my name.